I'm going to talk about the VLSI design industry. Human capital, let's not forget about that. Do we have the skill sets as of today, right? So everything that I'm talking about today is, these are some of the things that are challenging India in becoming a power play in the semiconductor ecosystem, right? So human capital plays a very, very important role. Do we have the skill sets to do the kind of innovation that is required in the semiconductor space? And finally, India as a market. Where are we today? You know, where are we going to be 10 years from now? Where were we 15 years ago? I'll talk about a little bit about statistics. So all of you, if you understand the semiconductor, I'll make it very simple. Complexity, everyone's talking about complexity, and Mr. Suraj also talked about the number of transistors, Moore's laws being, for the last 40 years being resilient as far as the growth in the transistors are concerned, right? So the complexity is increasing, but the design cycle is reducing. So the complexity is increasing, design cycles are reducing, that is time to market, and the cost of product is being very competitive. But what are the starting block for VLSI design? Right, for every semiconductor chip, or every chip that goes into your phone, or every chip that goes in the office automation, or in the IT, you need EDA tools to design India as a viable location for manufacturing facility. It is. You see the infrastructure. Government has done, which for the last 10 years, government had never initiated a policy for IT. They just initiated a semiconductor policy. So you're seeing activities happening in the semiconductor space. Activity as far as setting up a manufacturing facility. Semi-India. That's what I'm going to be talking about. You know, the EDA tools, the VLSI, the IP, the design verification, the fab, the left electronic industry. I don't have time to elaborate on that, but I'm going to concentrate my presentation more on the right-hand side. So companies with domain expertise driving India business. So technology evolution. Everyone knows about it in the 1980s to mid-1990. We were basically the optimizers. Talking about VLSI design, I'm talking about embedded software, I'm talking about hardware board design. Right, if you look at the estimated forecast for the estimated revenue for the design market in 2005 was 3.2 billion, and it's going to grow to $43 billion. Today, the design starts, I've listed the design starts. If you look at it, we started off with 320, 360, and we're going to reach 2075, which is not enough. These are the design starts that are happening still in the 130 nanometer, 90 nanometer space, right? So I'm from an EDA company, Magma Design Automation. We started off again as a service company. Working with the parent company, which is situated in US, doing some maintenance work. We rapidly changed that. We started off in 2004. Today we are doing the majority of the innovation that is happening out of India. Right? We're doing innovation in Bangalore, we're doing innovation in Noida, we're doing innovation in Bombay. So multinational corporations and domestic companies are going from design services to innovation. That has to happen. Why is India called the VLSI design superstore? Strong education infrastructure. We have a good education infrastructure. But today, I go to Delhi College of Engineering, I go to IIT, I talk about semiconductor. Most of these guys know about IIM, finance, banking. All of them want to become investors because there's a lot of money out there. No one wants to become a semiconductor engineer because they're not educated. They don't know about the market. The faculty is not educated about it. There are no design courses out there. So we have to make sure the industry, like the IBMs of the world, the TIs, the Infineon, the ST, they have to collaborate with academia. They have to educate the faculty. They have to introduce good design courses. China is competing in the manufacturing space. As far as design is concerned, IP laws, language, there are many other barriers. Right, that is going to attract multinational companies to go out there. It's going to take its time, but we have to make sure that we don't bask in our glory just because we're cost competitive today and we have the design talent. We need to innovate. We need to be ahead. Let them be the optimizers and the enablers. We need to be the innovators. So software content in the IC industry, again, talked about explosion in software. And just like looking at the slide that Mr. Suraj had presented on the Airbus, today the software growth, because more and more functionality is being asked by consumers, the software growth is an exponential growth of software. If you look at bringing a car, someone presented the car, I think Ronnie did. If you try to bring out a car into the market, 50% of the R&D is spent on software development. Today the software cost far exceeds the hardware cost when it comes to the product development cost.
If you're wondering what to start next, I think he has given some very interesting insights. Coimbatore is known for textiles and foundry and certain manufacturing. I think entrepreneurs in Coimbatore can look at semiconductors. Now, between now and the cocktails and dinner, we have 5 more events. The next 2 short presentations are there. We have one person who is a user, that is Ravindran, is going to speak for the next 10 minutes on leveraging business benefits through ERP. He is a man who is practicing and using SAP. After that, we have banking solutions from HSBC. Ravindran.
Good evening to you all. Before starting the session, I have an appeal. By seeing the topic now, it's going to be about ERP. And if you see my designation now, Senior Manager SAP Practice. And see, you all know SME crowd here, CEOs, some representatives all here. I know in my experience, you know, come to or jumped into some conclusion, I think this session may not be relevant to me. So my appeal is, please open your mind. Because like you know, my earlier speakers like Mr. Prabhat, even Mr. Lingraj and all know they're talking about SMEs, the need for technology and need for innovation for SMEs. See, going for an ERP product or ERP package, nowadays, you know, it is getting a mandatory for SMEs. So my ultimate message I am giving in brief now, it is going to be why an ERP for SMEs, HP and HP. I'll be now giving that perspective also to you to make your job of selecting a product or selecting a vendor. And time is short now, I'll just probably rushing up. See, the quick agenda is going to be like this. Where we are. We in the sense I am representing an SME and know what is required for SMEs in the ERP front and how to achieve the ERP part successfully. And of course, briefly I'll just go across about the solution providers. In fact, Precall also we are a solution provider now, besides a user. And of course, we'll meet in the dinner time, no? Probably any question answer you have. See, one very important perception or clarity is that no SMEs, like no, they are not simple. Small, medium enterprises, but they are not simple. They have all complications. That's what I quickly cover in this. Work in lean environments, limited IT resources, and mostly depending on some accounting packages for data processing. This is a fact. And with little or no data to share it among the stakeholders. I think this will be the core point I'll be addressing. Unable to get the right information in time for decision making. See, SMEs also they have to make decisions. They have to make effective decisions faster to beat another SME who is in the same line. And functional operations are ad hoc and not standardized. Not able to realize and adopt proven business practices. Sometimes the expectations under IT are higher than that of large enterprises. With a lot of SMEs while providing the solutions, we do realize a fire within them to marry suitable technology. Texas Ventures, Intech, Codicia, and HP and SAP for the opportunity given to present the requirement of ERP for the SMEs. Thanks a lot.
Industries can try and then use it, not necessarily the large ones. Now we have a slightly different topic. I'm going to invite Soumyadeep Chowdhury, who's going to speak. He's the Senior Vice President and Head of SME South to HSBC. He's going to speak on banking solutions for SMBs. He's going to take the next 10 minutes to speak on this.
Taking the flavor slightly away from a lot of technical issues that have been raised here. We have been hearing about semiconductors and ERP solutions for the small and medium enterprises space. I'd like to take your mind slightly away to things which sound much more boring, but nevertheless important, namely a question of finance and banking, especially for the SMEs. Now, what I have in mind is basically to give you a broad outlay of HSBC's insight into SMEs and how we mean to partner the SMEs in the country. So without further ado, let me move ahead. I'd like to split this up essentially into three parts, three very small sections. A first viewpoint of overviews of SME as we define it in the banking domain. The second is how we therefore devised our structure for the SME space in the country. And lastly, a one-slider sort of a thing on the sort of awards and recognitions that come to us all the time in terms of our solution provision for this segment. When we talk about SMEs out here, let me first, before going into the next slide, let me try and clarify one issue out here. It's very difficult to actually define what is an SME, because starting with the Government of India, then coming down to Reserve Bank of India, then all financial institutions, any other nodal body, everyone have their own way of defining what constitutes an SME. Various organizations go by various norms. Some follow a principle of maybe a net worth criterion, some follow a turnover criterion. So it's very difficult to do an apple-to-apple sort of a comparison. In our HSBC space, we define an SME to be an enterprise which has a turnover of up to 50 crores. Anything beyond that moves into what we refer to as a mid-market enterprise, and thereafter to the local large corporates, and then the global relationships. So that's how we have split up the entire space. And 50 crores is what we define to be the SME space, where we intend bringing in greater focus for customized solutions for this space. So let's move on to what we define to be SMEs, and therefore an overview of the SME space in India. Needless to say, it plays a vital role in economic development for the country as a whole. How? Let's substantiate with some data. And these are all coming out of a local study that recently Dun & Bradstreet did. They have a guesstimate. Estimate is a wrong word out here. I would more go by a guesstimate that there are about 20 million SME units spread all over the country. And these are no geographic concentration. It's equally spread beyond metros, even in rural, semi-urban areas. They contribute 50% of the total exports of India, believe it or not. They account for 45% of India's industrial employment. They have exhibited over the past 2 years an overall growth rate of 11.5%. If you go by the RBI governor's recent statement on what our overall GDP growth should be in 2007-8, it's pegged at around 8.5%. So needless to say, this clearly demonstrates that they are definitely outpacing the overall growth rate of the country. And they also contribute to about 40% of India's domestic production. And this all comes from this Dun & Bradstreet data, which I'd be glad to share with you if any of you is interested offline. Needless to say, this brings us to the basic conclusion that SMEs' needs, therefore, have to be fostered. So what are the challenges, as we perceive from the HSBC space, that faces the SME group? it can be categorized in three areas. The first one, needless to say, it's a capital short structure. They desperately need capital. They have limitations in pumping in their own capital because they are all in a growth phase. But their growth requirements far outpace the availability of capital that is there in the system. Needless to say, with such limited capital availability going around, such capital are largely dictated by large corporates. HSBC is of course also a partner to this overall crime, primarily because everyone wants to chase large corporates because of the risk aspects involved. So obviously, there's also another question to be considered here, that a few large corporates do give you a bulk of the business, but that equation is changing and changing very, very fast. If you look at the HSBC space in India today, I'd go so far as to say that SMEs contribute about 48% to our overall commercial banking revenues. That's the sort of growth that we are talking about. That's the sort of manpower commitment, that's the sort of capital commitment that we are bringing in this space. The second issue that invariably comes in is lack of suitable and sustainable bank finance. Invariably, and this has been traditionally followed in the banking structure and domain in India, unfortunately, fortunately, whatever you call it. The moment you approach a bank, it can be any bank, the traditional method has been, what is the security that you bring on the table? The entrepreneur naturally turns around and says, if I had security to provide, I'd rather liquidate and use it for my business. Why should I come to a bank? That's a basic challenge that exists, and unfortunately it's true. It's phasing out, definitely phasing out, but that basic roadblock definitely still remains. This is also largely driven by the fact that SMEs haven't really come up the curve so far in terms of the degree of financial disclosures and reporting that are expected in a normal, mature finance sector. That is a challenge that faces the SME sector, and definitely, my previous speaker was talking about ERP solutions. These are platforms definitely that would definitely help in going a long way in such disclosures and evenness in terms of whatever information is required on the table for a bank to support you. The third area, the poor service levels that we have been accustomed to. Unfortunately, what we have followed in the last 60 years post-independence is essentially social banking. The word service, some or other, has been thrown out of the window somewhat. But with the entrance of new generation private banks in the mid-90s, and also the local foreign banks really perking up their infrastructure, everyone has fallen in step here. And I'm sure everyone in this room would now agree that the banking space brings in a lot more professionalism and service orientation than they did even 10 years ago. So these are the basic three areas where SMEs face their challenges. And areas like core engineering, textile machinery, tourism. Tourism is something that has been majorly, somehow or other, been missed out in this part. Because if you look at it that way, Coimbatore is practically the gateway to entire South India. Be it the hills, be it the sea, be it the backwaters, be it the jungles. Invariably, Coimbatore is the preferred destination from where people make their moves. We follow what we refer to as a solution approach. We don't have customized packages, off-the-shelf sort of products for anyone. We understand the client's business and then bring the solutions on the table. They are not a homogeneous group, and that is why we can't have off-the-shelf sort of products for everyone. At HSBC, we do know that your requirements would vary even within one industry from company to company, depending on which part of the growth phase you are in. Able to take any questions that you have. I'm also around. Thank you very much for a patient hearing, and I hope you found this useful.
Suggested a few solutions and alternatives, so how to enhance and improve your business and take some lessons out of it. Now we are coming towards the close of the day. We have had inaugural address, the keynote address, and the chief guest presidential address. We also had people speaking on the solutions. We had people from the banks, We had people who talked from the software angle, opportunities for new businesses, new manufacturing. The best way to round it up is to have a person who is well known in Coimbatore. If I have to introduce Dr. Weiler, it's like showing a candle to the sun. I thought I best allow Mr. Weiler himself to come and then speak. And I'm told that Mr. Weiler has visited Coimbatore more than 130 times. And he represents India in Germany. And Weiler is a very household name in Coimbatore, of course, and of course in India. So over to Dr. Weiler.
Tea made out of hops, better known under the brand name Kingfisher. Now you know all about how to run a company, where to get money, how to design your products, how to sell it. But give me a few minutes before you rush to the cocktails to speak about these human beings who have to make your products for the global customer. How to make the Indian industry more competitive. What are the possibilities to get better skilled workers?